Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in a few minutes. If you're just joining us, we will be starting in a few minutes. We'll start in about 1 minute. Still have some people coming on. All right, everyone, I'm going to pull up a different PowerPoint slide, so give me 1 second. And while I'm doing that, if our three panelists would like to can introduce them really quickly, and then I'll have them briefly introduce themselves. But we have with us today dietitians that work in CKD, so that's Melanie Betz from University of Chicago, a dialysis dietitian, Renee Fung, and Kelly Nemec, a transplant dietitian, also from the University of Chicago. So welcome. So yeah, if you ladies want to say anything, please go ahead. I'm just pulling up the other PowerPoint deck really quickly.
Thanks for having us, Melissa, and KFI. Again, my name is Melanie Betz. I work at the University of Chicago in the nephrology department, and I really specialize in CKD for people who are pre-dialysis. So my goal is to really help slow the progression of CKD as much as possible and help manage all the comorbidities and symptoms of CKD.
My name is Renee. Currently, I'm working with DaVita Dialysis Center. So most of my patients are obviously they're already on dialysis, ESRD. Sometimes we get some acute patients as well.
And hi, I'm Kelly. I'm one of the transplant dietitians at University of Chicago Medicine. So I primarily cover the kidney pancreas transplants and then the kidney living donors. And my role is to get our patients nutritionally optimized to get them to transplant. I work with patients who are on dialysis and then also some patients who have CKD and are not yet on dialysis yet.
Okay, thank you. So I will briefly share this. DaVita is a healthcare provider focused on transforming care delivery to improve quality of life for patients globally. The company is the largest provider of kidney care services in the U.S. and has been a leader in clinical quality and innovation for 20 years. Through DaVita Kidney Care, the company treats patients with chronic kidney failure and end-stage renal disease. DaVita is committed to bold, patient-centric care models, implementing the latest technologies and moving toward integrative care offerings for all. As a community first and company second, DaVita believes in supporting organizations that make a difference in our communities. To learn more, visit davita.com/community. So welcome everyone to our virtual Living with Kidney Disease and Transplant. This session is called Ask a Dietitian. I am your moderator, Melissa Prest, Foundation Dietitian for the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois. I'd like to start by thanking our sponsors for making this virtual event possible. And before we begin officially, a few reminders. So all attendees are in listen-only mode. Since this is an interactive session, our hope is that it's an interactive session, we would encourage you to use the Q&A box to type in your questions for our dietitians. If you're having any technical difficulties, please use the chat feature to connect with one of our NKFI staff members who will attend to your concerns. This session is being recorded and a recording will be released later in the week. So we've already had some introductions for our speakers here. Sorry about that. So without further ado, we're gonna just kind of start and go into the questions. So I can minimize the PowerPoint, I guess, and I can have it just be so everyone can see your full faces. Okay, so the first question that we have is, I've been ordering takeout more frequently since the shelter-in-place order was passed. Do you recommend any healthy or kidney-friendly meals and/or restaurants in Chicago? That could be for anyone.
That's a really great question. I think a lot of us are maybe ordering out a lot more just because it's sort of comforting given the current situation, and it's just something to look forward to, honestly, when you're sort of stuck in quarantine. So maybe some of the other dietitians can give specific recommendations about places in Chicago. Some of my general tips are to always sort of do your homework before you order. A lot of places have nutrition information online, so go ahead and take a look at that sodium information, especially before you order, because it can be sort of surprising. Something that you think might be lower in sodium actually isn't. Other general tips are to avoid, of course, fried foods, and maybe ask for sauces or those saucy things on the side, and then you can add just a little bit, because that's oftentimes where a lot of that sodium comes from.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off what Melanie just mentioned, I usually tell a lot of my patients to just look online, look at all the nutrition information, because that's all available. A lot of my patients, I'll have them download the MyFitnessPal app, which has a lot of nutrition information that restaurants already have. Something that I've seen with coronavirus that a lot of my patients have been kind of worried about too is just getting out into the grocery store and not being able to get groceries and to get food and stuff like that. So, just trying to see if there's a support system or a family member or someone else who can drop groceries off or prepare meals or things like that to kind of help avoid eating out as much as often might help too.
And in the dialysis aspect, most patients need to really watch their fluids because I know that some clinics are also not offering extra treatment right now. So let's say if you have a lot of fluid gain, what may be an option previously to go in for an extra treatment to remove more fluid might not be an option now. So, still feel free to order, from restaurant that seems interesting to you, but still, really measure out how much fluid you're really drinking. And then a lot of time when you go out, when you're ordering food out, sodium is really hard to avoid too. But protein, patients on dialysis really needs to make sure that they're getting their protein. So I would say when you're ordering takeout, make sure that you're getting some type of protein in your meal.
Great, thank you all. Kind of thinking about meal planning, and are there any virtual or online meal planning services that you would recommend?
I know that the DaVita website has a lot of renal-friendly recipes. So, I always ask my patients, take a look at that. And I also know that, a lot of grocery stores are also offering early hours for people who are elderly and also who are more vulnerable to go in and buy more groceries. So one thing that I tell my patients is if you're going to meal prep, look in the DaVita website for their recipe.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I know that there's a lot of good information on DaVita, and I know some of the other websites like the American Association of Kidney Patients, they have some good information, then links to other resources as well, like Fresenius, Northwest Kidney Centers, DaVita, and things like that. I would say in terms of like virtual and online meal planning, I know personally trying to do that for, people with CKD that I've worked with, it has been difficult because a lot of them, the software platforms really do not tailor things down for, the changes that we make in the diet with chronic kidney disease. So I know a lot of times, it's been tricky to kind of use those online platforms. So I think what Renee was saying is kind of utilizing some of those online resources in terms of just, recipes or other ideas for how to make your plate. Maybe your better bet than like an online meal planning service. I don't know, Kelly or Melanie, any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. A lot of my patients come in and they're using MyFitnessPal, which is a great tool. It's really user friendly and it's free, but they can pull that platform can pull nutrition information from anything that anyone puts in. So it's not, the information is not very well vetted and it could be very incorrect. So for example, there might be, I don't know, a fried chicken sandwich in there that has no sodium, and we know that's likely not correct. And so if you do use platforms like that, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt and sort of use your best judgment to see if the nutrition information does make sense. The other thing is specifically potassium and phosphorus might not be in there at all, and that happens pretty often. And that's oftentimes something that we're talking about with patients, so you have to be careful of that as well.
Great, thank you. So there's two questions actually have come in from Facebook. One is an all fresh vegetable diet the best diet overall for kidney failure patients? But I kind of want to expand that question a little further and sort of thinking through on food safety. So Kelly, do you want to talk a little bit about just including fresh fruits and vegetables in the diet and food safety concerns that a transplant patient may have? And then if Renee or Melanie want to kind of just talk about fresh fruits and vegetables in the diet, but I thought that'd be a good place to start.
Yeah, so post-transplant with, regards to fruits and vegetables, we usually, recommend washing them really, really well with different fruit washes. We have a few different concoctions that we'll recommend to patients after transplant, but vinegar in water, half lemon in water, or there's you can buy pre-made washes that you can use to wash your fruits and veggies with too. So just making sure everything's washed really, really well. We usually say, stay away from buffets, restaurants that have like food that's been sitting out for a long period of time. So like Chipotle, for example, or like a Subway that has fruit, veggies, and foods like that are sitting out for I don't know how long sometimes, or we sometimes just don't know the exact temperature sometimes it's been out at. We typically stay away from places like that too. But washing our fruits and veggies really well with some of those, acidic washes is recommended.
Great, thank you. Melanie?
And then in terms of just kind of a diet that really focuses on getting in lots of fruits and vegetables, for my patients who are not on dialysis, Renee might have something to add for hers because people on dialysis have some additional considerations. But yes, trying to get in as many of those as possible for the vast majority of my patients is a great benefit. We know that sort of a more plant-based diet can slow the progression of kidney disease. And so that can be a great way and a great sort of easy guideline for patients to follow, is just trying to sort of eat more plant foods and eat less animal foods. A lot of times the question of potassium comes up when we start talking about fruits and vegetables. And in my patients, actually, a lot of them don't need to watch potassium. It's sort of a myth that anyone with kidney disease has to limit how much potassium they eat. Especially if you're earlier stages, a GFR of say greater than 20, chances are you don't, and you actually want to eat a lot of potassium. And so getting in all those fruits and vegetables is a great way to reach your potassium goal. If you are one of those patients that does need to watch potassium, which is really dictated by how much potassium is in your blood. So if you do have high levels of potassium in your blood, there may be certain fruits and vegetables that you should avoid. But still, in general, trying to get in a lot of fruits and vegetables, maybe the low potassium ones, if you do need to consider that, is important.
I agree with what Melanie was saying. So for dialysis patients, I do have patients who actually need to consume more potassium, and some they actually need to restrict on their potassium. So, but a dialysis clinic usually draw labs every month, so your potassium is really being closely monitored. But some of the higher potassium food that you might want to watch out for are like bananas, any potato products, if you're making like mashed potatoes, some of the tomato products, But if, let's say, if your potassium is high, but you really like potatoes, you can consider leaching the potato, which is soaking the potato maybe overnight or boiling it twice before eating it. When you do that, most of the potassium will leak out of the potato, and then you can still enjoy it. But in general, I would say a diet that is high in fruits and vegetables is great, because it provides you with a lot of different vitamins and minerals, and it can also boost a really strong immune system, especially, you know, with the coronavirus that's going on. That's something that is so important to us. But if potassium is a concern, definitely watch out for those that are super high. But it's okay, because, you know, sometimes it might go high, and it's fine. We are going to monitor your lab all the time, and we're going to talk to the doctor. We can make diet modification or their medication that can lower your potassium.
Thank you all. And I think the one thing I do want to just mention to or add to this great discussion is that you know, frozen vegetables are totally okay to eat. You know, basically, if you don't know, when they pick vegetables from the farm, they're basically flash frozen at the time that they are, you know, harvested, so that it retains all those great nutrients. That's the same as our fresh vegetables. So I don't, you know, I just, you know, in terms of times of what's going on right now and sheltering in place, we want to make sure that we're not limiting vegetables and fruits that aren't fresh. So it's okay to eat things like the frozen ones, no added salt, canned is fine, you know, or packed in juice for fruit, that's okay. If all you have available is the salt ones, you know, usually what I've talked with patients is drain them, rinse them really well to rinse some of that salt off. But we still want to make sure that we are including a healthy, balanced diet. And so, you know, just want to caution people from, you know, only purchasing fresh fruits and vegetables and limiting some of the other ones that are available out there for them.
That's a really good point. And something that I've come across in my personal life is that with shopping the last month or so, is that my grocery store has been practically sold out of all frozen vegetables, which is a bummer because those obviously last a long time. And so I've been experimenting with freezing fresh ones, which has worked pretty well. A lot of times I can just throw it in a Ziploc bag in my freezer and it's just fine. Other ones you might want to blanch first before you freeze, otherwise the texture can get a little weird. But you can easily Google how to freeze vegetables, and most of them you really can just throw in your freezer, and if you use them within a couple months, they work perfectly fine.
Great, thank you. And so then there was another question, what is a good diet for a 14-year-old girl with chronic kidney disease? I don't know, Melanie, do you see pediatric kidney disease patients, or?
I do not see pediatric patients. I would say, honestly, depending on the stage, all of the things that we've been talking about sort of still apply. Really trying to get a well-balanced diet, lots of fruits and vegetables, making sure that they are getting enough protein to grow. A lot of times in kidney disease diets, you hear people talking about restricting protein, and in a 14-year-old, I would be pretty concerned about that and probably wouldn't recommend a protein restriction. Do the other dietitians have any other comments on that?
Yeah, so I actually cover pediatric transplant as well. So I will work with the kiddos, you know, pre-transplant too, and just getting them to transplant. So sometimes a lot of the biggest things that sometimes we'll see is just making sure that they're eating enough and continuing to grow and maintain healthy weight. That's, you know, really important for them too, and just making sure, like Melanie said, that they're, you know, eating a balanced diet. And kind of depending on where they're at in their stage of CKD, it kind of depends on what would need to be monitored in terms of eating.
Great, thank you. Let's see, and then we had a question about salads with vegetables. Are they one of the preferred ways to slow the progression of CKD? So, you know, we were kind of talking about with the CKD diet before, really going more to plant-based proteins, doing less protein than you may do in dialysis or even transplant, normalizing protein. But for sure in the CKD, before we even get on dialysis, and we want to kind of slow that progression, we definitely look at limiting some of those protein amounts and the type like Melanie was talking about. So salads with good vegetables, obviously there's would be one way we can do it. But anything to add to that, Melanie?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I feel like I hear from patients all the time, like, "Oh, I don't like salads. How am I going to get in vegetables?" And there are so many other ways that you can eat your vegetables. And if if you do like salads, that works too. Obviously, like a salad is a great, easy, sort of obvious way to have a giant plate of vegetables that can be delicious. If you do want to go the salad route, I definitely recommend making your salad more exciting. So adding some fun ingredients. So for example, sometimes I like to add a little bit of whole grain pasta to my salad to make it a little bit heartier and make it feel like it's filling. Making sure there is some protein on there. For my patient population, preferably a plant-based protein. So maybe using some low sodium canned garbanzo beans. You can throw those on there, maybe some nuts, or even a hard boiled egg or two would be fine as well. So that's sort of an easy way. Other good ways to get in vegetables are doing like a stuffed pepper. So stuffing a big like bell pepper with some sort of whole grain, like maybe brown rice or whole grain couscous or something like that with some other fun vegetables in there. Doing stir fries over brown rice, that can be a great way to get in vegetables. Yeah, it can be salads if that's what you like, but it certainly doesn't have to be.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see if a Q&A here. Is there such a thing as eating too much salad?
No. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard to eat too many vegetables. With salads, some of the concerns that do come up, especially if it's a salad from a restaurant, is that they can be really high in sodium. So when you are building your salad, you want to be really careful with salad dressing and use maybe just a little bit, or make your own salad dressing at home. There's a lot of really great recipes. My favorite is just to mix olive oil and balsamic vinegar. That's easy and basically salt-free. Being careful with ingredients like too much cheese or bacon bits, or like fried crispy wontons. Those things can add up, and then maybe you could have too much salad, but probably not.
And in a dialysis standpoint, if someone really absolutely loves salad, just make sure that your salad does have some kind of protein in there, because for dialysis patients, it's so important to get all that protein, because you're basically losing a lot of the protein when you go and dialyze. So, if you're going to have any type of salad, make sure there's some tofu or some kind of meat in there.
Any concerns from a transplant standpoint, Kelly?
Just making sure like it's preferably prepared at home, so you know what's going into it and how it's prepared, how it's washed, how everything's cleaned. I'll usually recommend my patients stay away from salads at restaurants and stuff like that, just because we don't know how it's prepared, how it's washed, just to err on the side of caution.
Excellent, thank you. So question about effective shopping for the current reality. Are there particular, quote, high nutrition foods that are also versatile enough to be put into several different kidney healthy recipes that would give me the most bang for my buck right now? I mean, I can start by saying legumes would be, versatile and can go in any one. Obviously, if you're on a dialysis, diet, or you're being treated with dialysis, we want to be mindful of your potassium levels. You can chime in more, but I know I would usually encourage my patients to include things like beans in their diets if they're really was pretty well controlled. We know that there is phosphorus in legumes and beans, but we also know that we don't absorb all of them. And so we don't absorb all of that phosphorus level in them. So the one concern I would have for a dialysis patient would be more of the potassium. So being, really careful in the portion of beans for that, or, nuts or seeds. But that would be one thing I could think of. Renee, I don't know if you want to add or comment anything else with that.
Yeah, right now, because dialysis patients are also so vulnerable with the virus, we're recommending our patients to kind of if you can, purchase 2 weeks worth of food. So if you're just purchasing all fresh fruits and vegetables, they might not last unless if you do what Melanie says to kind of freeze them. So either you freeze them, or if you don't have the amount of storage at home, next option will be, some canned food if that's the last resort.
Melanie or Kelly, anything to add about versatile foods?
Yeah, you took the easy one, Melissa. Beans and legumes, lentils and nuts and that sort of thing is definitely a very versatile food. I think also just having some healthy whole grains on hand can go in all sorts of things too. So having brown rice, whole grain pasta, whatever sort of, I call them like fun, trendy grains that you can find at the grocery store. So you can find things like farro or wheat berries, bulgur, barley, all of those things can be sort of the base of a sort of bowl type meal, or it could go in that stuffed pepper that I mentioned earlier. It could go in your salad. You can sort of make a grain salad out of them. I feel like those are really versatile ingredients that last forever. So those are nice to have on hand.
Yeah, pretty much just what Melanie was saying, like a lot of those grains, like quinoa too, like there's just there you can get a lot out of it, and you can utilize it in very different ways, such as salads or in sides, or even different types of salads with vegetable based or however you want to use it.
Great, thank you. So there was a question on Facebook, and I'll read it, but I would just encourage whoever had put that on here to follow up with their physician or pharmacist. But it was asking if, do you know if any beta blockers may have a negative effect on GFR? So I think with that, it's always a good conversation with your physician and your pharmacist, just based on what is going on with you for that question. Unless someone on here wanted to say anything in addition to that. No. Okay.
Ask your nephrologist.
Okay. So another question is it okay to eat seafood? Kelly, anything on seafood for transplant?
Oh, wait, I don't think we heard the question.
Oh, I'm
sorry.
Is it okay to eat seafood?
So from a post-transplant perspective, we say no, like raw seafood after transplant. So, unfortunately, no sushi. Just making sure everything is cooked to the appropriate temperature.
Great, thank you. Renee or Melanie?
In dialysis standpoint, there's no restriction on seafood.
Yeah, I would say you can certainly enjoy fish or seafood if that's something that you enjoy. But like with any meat, we'll sort of classify that as a meat for this discussion. You just want to be careful with portion size because there is quite a bit of protein in it. So whether you are eating fish or seafood or pork or chicken or beef for that matter, you just want to keep your portions on the smaller side and work with your dietitian to figure out what a appropriate portion size is for you. For most people, it's somewhere between 4 and 6 ounces.
Great, thank you. So the next question, Kelly, you might want to take it. Is fried food good for a 12-year-old?
That is a very good question. So it would kind of depend on, where they're plotting on the curve, and, if it's, a child who is really needing to gain a lot of weight and has a poor appetite and just not eating much, or a picky eater, for example, if they really, really like fried chicken and, we're having trouble getting in calories and protein and from other foods, then yes, I would say fried chicken would be okay in moderation, of course, not for every single meal, but, if we're really having trouble to find a protein source and calories and nutrition that, would work for the child, then yes, trying to incorporate fried chicken would be okay. However, if they're plotting, high on the growth curve, in that overweight to, obese range, then I would definitely say, staying away from fried chicken, trying to go with more grilled chicken options, baked chicken, things like that. But it kind of depends on the patient. It kind of depends on where they're growing and if they have a great appetite and growing well, or, you know, picky eater and really not eating anything, having a hard time meeting his, you know, protein needs.
Thank you. And there are like alternative ways to you know, do fried foods. So you have an air fryer, you can do that, and actually they have air fryer baskets. I know I picked one up from like a grocery store. It just had it's like an open basket with a like a tray underneath to kind of collect anything, but that could be used for kind of air frying in the oven. So those are ways to kind of get that crispy and flavor from food that people like in fried foods without actually, you know, doing like a deep fry.
Mm-hmm. And even like in a lot of times with the pediatric population, it's, you know, working with the family and working with mom and just trying to figure out what recipes work and which textures and which foods work for the family, and what works best for the child. So sometimes we'll try and experiment with like different breadings for chicken or things like that, different ways to prepare it to kind of make it seem like it is a fried chicken. I'll sometimes see a lot of times like pre-transplant, or, you know, that there's some taste changes or taste alterations with kids. So really working with the family and trying to find what works best for them and what texture recipe combos work best for the family.
Great, thank you. There's another question asking, is it okay to avoid meat, especially in pediatric patients? So Melanie, do you want to take is it okay to avoid meat?
Yes, it is definitely okay to avoid meat. I think one of the common concerns if you take meat out of your diet is that you're not going to get enough protein. And for my population in pre-dialysis, that really is not a concern basically ever. It's actually pretty easy to get the amount of protein that someone needs pre-dialysis. And so as long as you are making sure that you include some protein source with each meal, and if you took out meat, obviously that would be a plant-based source. So that would be like nuts or lentils or peas, even whole grains, nuts. If you leave in dairy, you could count like milk or yogurt or eggs even. As long as you're getting some sort of good protein source, I can promise you you'll get enough protein. And really that could actually do your kidneys a lot of good, just because meat provides so much protein per serving. It can be easier to how much protein you're eating into the range that we want it if you're only choosing those plant proteins.
Renee, anything to add?
And then if the patient is on dialysis, then it will be completely different, because dialysis patient will most of them needs to be on a high protein diet. I do have vegetarian patients, and it's completely doable. Like what Melanie had touched on, you know, several different examples of plant-based protein. And if they are still not achieving the protein level that they need to be, we can always look into adding protein powder in the diet.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to mention too. You know, we have other protein modulars and things like that that I'll work with patients and families with too, if we need to incorporate protein into the diet in another way, like either protein powders or supplement shakes, things like that.
There are a lot of different cultures that are vegetarian based. So even in children and adults, so a vegetarian diet can be healthy and balanced, you know, for all ages. We have a couple of questions here in the Q&A, so let's look at these. If you are eating the most lean protein, i.e. 90% plus lean ground beef, Angus steak, etc., will this be harmful to CKD? And the most moderate portion, like a box of playing cards?
Yeah, so the leanness of the meat, whether it's chicken or, you know, like, or ground beef, right? If you got like the 80-20 versus the 93-7, it actually has about the same amount of protein. The lean one actually is going to have a little bit more protein. So in terms of sort of contributing that protein to your diet and sort of the acid load on your kidneys, which is our concern with protein, it actually is about the same. So probably from a heart standpoint, it would be better to choose the lean choices, but from a kidney standpoint, it's honestly pretty much the same.
Great, thank you. And then another question or follow-up question of that one is salmon, red snapper, rainbow trout acceptable proteins for CKD patients? And I think we answered that earlier, that any seafood, is fine. For post-transplant patients, is it okay to drink protein drinks and smoothies?
Yeah, so yes is the short answer. But it also depends on, what else you're eating throughout the day. If that's what you're going to have for breakfast, say for breakfast you have a protein shake or a smoothie with a protein powder, that would be totally fine. It kind of depends on, how they're doing post-transplant, but we typically recommend immediately after transplant a high protein diet to help with wound healing and recovery. But long-term, recommend a moderate protein amount. So if, 3 meals a day, say a few years post-transplant, if you're having 3 meals a day with a plus protein shakes, that might be a little too much. But if you're doing, a protein shake, in place of a meal, that would probably be okay.
Great, thank you.
I might also want to add, if I could, about choosing protein shakes and protein powders for any stage of CKD, to sort of clear whatever product that you're using by your dietitian, because a lot of those have lots of really sort of weird ingredients and maybe potentially phosphorus additives. And so just being careful with the brand that you do choose if you decide to go that route.
Yeah, I know when I was working in dialysis, I usually try to, stick with ones that were really just mainly protein with not a lot of added, vitamins, minerals, and other stuff in them. Renee, I'm sure you're doing similar.
Yeah, one way we tell our patient to look at is just look at the ingredient list. If you see anything with PHOS, that there's phosphorus in there, so better to find another product that does not have PHOS in there.
This is kind of like a follow-up question with that, but are weight loss treatment or supplements safe to take after transplant, like Herbalife or Neutralites, for example?
So herbal supplements, I usually recommend staying away from herbal supplements after transplant. Anything that's like questionable or like non-herbal, I usually defer that to the nephrologist. But yeah, any herbal supplements, things like that, I usually tell my patients to stay away from. Herbal teas, that too.
Yeah. And I think in dialysis, probably kind of concerned about potassium from some of the herbal compilation of the supplements.
And the thing with herbal supplement is because is not really FDA regulated, or there's just not much research in there, so you just don't really know what it does to your body. So I usually recommend patients not to take any herbal supplements.
I do the same.
Great. So another question from Facebook: worried about my granddaughter, pediatric patient, because she lost a lot of weight since she started dialysis. Is there any food to help her gain weight? And I think this would be similar for anyone, that, on this panel can answer. So Renee, I think you wanted to say something about.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is, I'm sure there's a dietitian that's following the patient because the patient is on dialysis. Really need to look at the labs and work out like a meal plan maybe with the dietitian in terms of how you can liberalize the food with the patient. Might be something that she can have more, or something that she needs to restrict. So it's kind of hard for me to just tell you, eat more of this or that. But bottom line, I'm sure protein is usually not something that we need to restrict. So go for any protein that the patient add in protein powder to add additional calories. And if the patient is really malnourished, can add some fat in the diet to assist. But the best way is really talk to the dietitian, because they have the bigger picture of what the situation of that specific patient is currently in.
Okay. So I'm confused about how much protein I need. Is there a difference between how much protein I need before I go on dialysis? How about when I'm on dialysis? So maybe we'll just have each of you discuss protein needs as we go through the stages. So Melanie, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, it is super confusing because it does change. And so if you just sort of Google how much protein a kidney patient should have, it's different based on what stage you're in. So for my patients, again, I work with patients who are pre-dialysis. We want sort of a low/moderate amount of protein. Technically the recommendation is 0.6 to 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. That can be a lot of math, and sometimes there's some additional math that goes in there. It's not necessarily that direct. So I would, of course, ask your dietitian exactly how many grams of protein you need. But again, the bottom line is that pre-dialysis, you want to sort of restrict or control how much protein you eat.
For a dialysis patient, usually we say about 1.2, so multiply 1.2 to your kilograms of your weight. But yeah, again, talk to your dietitians if you want like a specific number.
And then post-transplant, like more long-term, we recommend kind of more of a moderate amount of protein, so around 1 gram per kilogram of body weight, roughly.
And so I know when I'm working with people, I kind of like to use the size of like the palm of my hand and modify from that. So, Melanie, I don't know, I usually kind of say if it's maybe about half, like if it was maybe a dialysis patient, I would say about the size of the palm, or maybe it's a little bit bigger of the size of your palm of your hand would be a serving. If you're on CKD, I would do maybe like a third or a half of that. So I don't know if that's kind of what you're doing as well with your patients.
Yep. I usually say half of the size of the palm of your hand, because that sort of makes sense. If you're bigger, you have bigger palms and you need more protein. So really trying to restrict, if you do eat meat, fish, or poultry, or any sort of animal protein, really trying to keep it to, again, half of the size of the palm.
For me, I usually use the size of deck of a card, because I have patients with larger palms and smaller palms. So I say a deck of card is about 3 to 4 ounces of protein. So depending on what your number is, I would tell them how many deck of cards we should eat a day.
And I'm usually working with, when I'm in like my pre-kidney transplant clinic, we're usually working on eating a lot of protein prior to transplant, just to get prepared for the transplant phase. And I'll usually recommend a palm of my hand for the protein source for pre-kidney.
Great, thank you. Let's see. I have been really stressed recently and I have lost my appetite as a result. Are there any eating habits that you recommend for appetite loss? What about protein shakes like Ensure or vegan protein powders? Anyone want to take that one? Renee, do you have it a lot with the dialysis patients you work with?
Yeah, I would say if you have absolutely no appetite and you're about to skip a meal, then go ahead and have a supplement, have a protein shake. But if you are able to eat some food, always try to eat the real food first. And let's say if you can only eat like half a bowl of food and then the rest, then you can go ahead and drink your supplement. Because if you drink your supplement first, then you'll be full and then you probably can't really eat any more real food. So always real food before protein shakes and all that. And if a dialysis patient can also have something called IDPN. So if that's something that's needed, you can talk to your dietitian. Basically, it's like a bag of protein that they can hang next to the dialysis machine. So when you dialyze, the protein will be infused through the machine into your blood.
some tips that I like to use for patients, and it really depends on why they've lost their appetite. Maybe if they're nauseous or taste changes, there's some different interventions that would work. One thing that a lot of patients find helpful is just trying to eat small, frequent meals. If you don't have much of an appetite, trying to get all of your nutrition in just 3 meals a day can be really hard, because you just get full really fast, and you're not going to eat that full dinner like you're used to doing. And so really making sure to get in maybe 3 meals and 3 snacks of smaller amounts of food that might help you meet your nutrition a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree, with you with what you guys are saying too. I'll recommend working with like high calorie, high protein foods. So just foods that just have a lot of calories for volume, whether that's like ice cream or like nuts or something like that just has a lot of calories for just a small volume, and prioritizing that first before going to a supplement.
This is a favorite question of mine. Is it true that avocados are not recommended for people living with kidney disease?
No. Avocados are surprisingly high in potassium. I think one avocado has somewhere around 1,000 milligrams if you eat the whole thing. So for many of my patients who do not need to restrict potassium, and most of my patients do not, you actually want to eat a lot of potassium because that helps control your blood pressure. Avocado is totally fine. It's lots of good fiber, lots of good potassium, and lots of good heart healthy fats. But the caveat to that is if you do have high potassium levels in your blood, which is more likely if you have more advanced kidney disease, then avocado might be something that you have to eat in moderation.
Yeah, so for dialysis patient, usually, generally speaking, about two grams of potassium. So like what Melanie said, 1,000 milligrams. So that's about one gram. So that's about half of what you're allowed to eat. But if your potassium level is under control and you really love avocado, then go ahead and have some avocado. Enjoy what you like.
And avocados are also, they're very calorically dense because it is a healthy fat. So if you are needing to get in other calories, or you have a decreased appetite and need to get those calories throughout the day, an avocado would be a good choice too.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think the one thing too is knowing what a portion size is for an avocado. So I kind of had showed some things around the office, and everyone was a little surprised that it was a little sliver of an avocado and not half or a whole avocado. So yeah, I'm not sure. There may be 8 servings for avocado or 4 servings. So it's like a sliver. So I think that's probably most likely easily worked into anyone's diet. So let's see. I've heard a lot about phosphorus. We haven't talked about phosphorus yet today, but I don't know what it does. Should I avoid it? Who would like to start the phosphorus conversation?
I can start. I love talking about phosphorus because that's basically what I talk to my patient every day. So if you are on dialysis and your doctor did say that phosphorus is a concern, then you would have to restrict your phosphorus. So phosphorus is very tricky because it is also used as a preservative. So a lot of canned food, there's phosphorus in there. There are also a lot of natural occurring phosphorus in food too. So it's almost impossible to completely avoid phosphorus. However, our body only absorb half of natural occurring phosphorus as compared to when phosphorus is used as an additive. So with that being said, it's always better to eat fresh fruits, vegetables, fresh meats. And let's say if your phosphorus is high, then there are certain foods that are extremely high in phosphorus we ask our patient to avoid, such as cheese, chocolate, nuts. These are 3 big ones that my patients usually struggle with. Some doctors will also prescribe something called a phosphorus binder, which is basically a medication that you take every time you eat. what it does it when you take the pill, and then but you have to take it with the food. And what it does it, the binder will bind to the phosphorus in the food, and then the phosphorus will be excreted into your stool, so your body will not absorb it.
Yeah, sort of piggybacking off of that, I actually recommend similar things for my patients. I usually say that anyone with CKD should avoid those artificial sources of phosphorus. So again, that's in pretty much any sort of processed food. So you'll find it in canned foods and sort of snack mixes, baking mixes, commercial sauces. And Renee mentioned earlier, the best way to find out if a product does have that artificial phosphorus in it is to look at the ingredients and find any ingredient that has the letters PHOS. And you have to really hunt. Like, it could be like diphosphoric acid or trisodium phosphate. It's going to be sort of buried in those sort of fancy sciencey words. So if a product has a word that has those letters PHOS in it, I would leave it alone. It probably also is high in sodium too. So another reason to let that be. But natural sources of phosphorus, so for my patients, like whole grains and nuts and beans and chocolate and all those things, I say are completely fine since our body doesn't absorb that phosphorus. And a lot of my patients don't have to be as strict with their phosphorus restriction as a dialysis patient. I say all of those things are completely fine and in fact good things to incorporate into your diet.
Any concerns with transplant and phosphorus?
So post-transplant, the great thing is most of the time we don't really need to restrict the diet nearly as much. So we really wouldn't need to, restrict phosphorus as much post-transplant. It kind of depends, like immediately after a transplant, if the kidney's still waking up a little bit, then yes, I'd recommend my patients to follow a low phosphorus diet until those levels kind of stabilize after transplant. But long term, patients really don't need to restrict phosphorus as much post-transplant. And then pre-transplant, I usually defer a lot of like phosphorus recommendations to their hemodialysis dietitian.
Great. Let's see. Why is it so difficult to lose weight with kidney disease? Does anyone, I know transplant, you're probably doing some stuff with that, right, Kelly?
Yeah. So pre-transplant, I'll work with patients on, getting them to our ideal kind of body weight for transplant. Our center, we have a specific BMI cutoff for transplant. Every center is a little bit different with their BMI cutoffs. But yes, I will work with my patients pre-transplant to get them to that goal weight. And I'll meet with them pre-transplant in clinic, and we'll set nutrition goals, weight loss goals, things like that. And then I'll follow up with them. I usually give like 1 to 2 months like in between phone calls, and I'll check up and see how their weight's going. We recently started like a weight loss clinic that's on hold now because of coronavirus, but we're starting like a monthly weight loss clinic for our pre and post transplant patients as well.
Great, thank you. Melanie, do you do anything with weight loss counseling with your pre-dialysis patients?
Yeah, I find sometimes patients come in and they find it really difficult to lose weight because they just don't know what to eat. People are often very, very confused. They think that they can't eat fruits and vegetables, and they think that they should be eating all of this white rice, and that's not very true, likely not true at all. And so kind of working with a dietitian and helping them understand the healthy foods that they can eat make the whole healthy eating process much easier and can make weight loss a little bit easier as well.
And then patients that I work with, mainly who struggle with weight loss, I think there are 2 things that I'm finding in patients that why they're struggling with weight loss. Number one, there are patients that dialysis patients that don't fully understand the concept with fluid gain and weight gain. So some of my patients will mistake, and I'm gaining so much weight right now, but I'm trying to explain to them that that is fluid weight and it's not true weight. And it is a very confusing concept to grasp. And secondly, I'm finding patients who are struggling with weight loss, not really because they don't know what they should and shouldn't eat, because, you know, I'm there every other day seeing them, talking to them, telling them what they should and shouldn't eat, is the behavioral piece, the psychological piece that is very challenging. Sometimes it's really important, you know, for me to build a good rapport with my patients and do a lot of motivational interviewing, finding out what the root cause is that they are not able to follow the diet. Sometimes it's completely unrelated to kidney disease. Sometimes it's because they're very stressed about a recent job loss or something like that. So.
Yeah, and I would find a lot of times when I would work with people on dialysis that they would start cutting back on things like protein, or they would kind of start cutting back on some foods because they wanted to lose weight, but then I would notice a negative trend in some of their lab values. So a lot of times it was, you know, kind of that education on what foods you'd want to make sure you're including for weight loss, or just in general for healthy eating, and that, you know, leading to weight loss. I think, you know, one of the other aspects too is just the activity component. So I think depending on what stage you're in, with CKD, which there's actually another question in here about, can better nutrition help me feel less tired? And so I think that you know, is something that a lot of patients struggle with, fatigue, and that also can impact their ability to engage in activity. And we all know that kind of that diet and exercise go hand in hand, and just, you know, for healthy weight management. So that's, I think, kind of another little part of that puzzle piece on why sometimes it can be a little harder for, you know, someone with kidney disease to lose weight. But any thoughts on, you know, kind of that better nutrition helps me feel less tired? I would say absolutely. But if anyone wants to chat a little bit about that. Melanie, I'll toss it to you.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely think proper nutrition can help you feel less tired. The first way that comes to my mind is a lot of times dialysis and CKD patients struggle with having too much fluid on their body, and that can make you feel really sluggish and make your legs feel really heavy, and even can make it hard to breathe for some patients. And so really being careful with how much salt you're eating can help your body not hold on to as much water, and so that can make you feel much better.
Also, another component that I'm going to add is end-stage renal disease patients. A lot of time they can also be be anemic. So if their hemoglobin is low, red blood cell count is low, that can also cause a fatigue. So that's another thing that we look at. Some medication that our doctor will prescribe to patients, and definitely if you're eating, you know, like a very nutritious meal, that is definitely going to help with your energy level.
Yeah, and I think some of the other things that are going on with just that fatigue, you know, we also know that our kidneys aren't working as well as we're kind of progressing through the stages. And then that buildup of kind of those waste products that normally would be excreted in the urine. And so either we're not really producing any urine when we kind of get to dialysis, or we're producing less of it as we progress through CKD. And so that can also cause someone to be tired and fatigue. So I know a lot of things that we would chat about on dialysis, which I'm sure you do as well, Renee, is making sure that, you know, in addition to eating really well, but it's also making sure that you know, kind of come to your treatments and get your full dialysis, because that will also help with just that feeling of fatigue. It also helps give you the medication to deal with the decreased blood count, like you were talking about with the anemia as well. So another question, and I just kind of laugh at this because Melanie and I were on a discussion board for renal dietitians on, I don't know if it was Facebook, or I think it was maybe older Americans, but it was talking about vitamin choices for people in stage 3 CKD. So is there a good vitamin for people with stage 3 kidney disease?
You said stage 3, Melissa?
Yes.
Yes. So there's not one out there that's like specially formulated for someone with CKD. There are vitamins that patients on dialysis take, but there's not one for CKD. In general, I don't recommend patients take any sort of multivitamin. I'm always a food first person. And so if you are eating a balanced diet, you're getting in your 5 servings of fruits and vegetables, you likely are getting all of the vitamins and minerals that you need. And so I don't usually recommend them. Another concern is that because your kidneys aren't getting rid of things the way that they should, there's some concern that some of those vitamins and minerals might build up in your body, potentially to toxic levels. And so it's really just not worth the risk, especially since your body doesn't really need it for most people.
Great. So I don't think we really we talked a little bit about it, but I don't think it came up in the questions. But kind of thinking through on fluids. So I know there are some different fluid requirements through the various stages. So you want to kind of start with CKD and fluid, and we'll go to dialysis and then transplant or post-transplant.
Yeah, so for my patients pre-dialysis, there really isn't a fluid restriction for the vast majority of them. And in fact, you really want to make sure that you are drinking a lot of water, because dehydration can actually hurt your kidneys and make the whole situation worse. And so you really want to make sure that you're drinking lots of water, but that changes dramatically once you get to dialysis.
So once you're on dialysis, if you are a new start, you're likely to be a little more liberalized on your fluid intake. As time progresses, you are likely to not urinate at all. When that happens, we really need to restrict the fluids per day. So usually about 1 liter a day, so 32 ounces. But that really depends on each person. You know, if you're a larger individual, if you're a smaller, 1 liter is really just like a very general recommendation. So some people might be able to drink a little more, some people might be able to drink a little less. But 1 liter a day is kind of what we recommend.
And then post-transplant, immediately after, we will have them we'll push fluids as much as we can, just to get that kidney working and flushing that kidney. I'll usually, when I see them post-transplant, I usually will have them drink, try to shoot for at least 8 big old glasses of water every day, but kind of as much as possible post-transplant while they're in the hospital. And then long-term, there's really no restriction, but just making sure you're staying hydrated and flushing the kidney.
Great. And I think I missed these 2 questions from Facebook. Is organic better than conventional? Anyone want to tackle that one? I will just mention that, I think there is a little, there tends to be some misnomer that organic means no pesticides, no chemicals, and that's not true. They're oftentimes different. They use, some different ones, but it doesn't mean that it's, pesticide or chemical free. So I know that that's sometimes confusing. And I will say that there's, various kind of back and forth on, is the dirty dozen, or I don't know if it's expanded now, is that list something we should follow or not? And I think that's kind of a debate even within some dietitian circles that, if you're going to do fruits and vegetables, follow this list for kind of like the quote dirty dozen and eat those organic, the other ones not. And then there's, other research that really just shows that it's, in terms of nutrient value, they should both be pretty similar. And composition and what you're going to get from a nutrient wise, and that one's not necessarily better than the other for that. But any thoughts from the dietitians here?
When I recommend food for my patients, I never really go into asking them to purchase organic or not organic food, and a lot of time organic food can be a little more expensive than the not organic ones. So I've seen really good outcome with patients who consume not organic food as well.
Yeah, and from a post-transplant perspective, I usually say it's up to the patient's preference. Just either way, just making sure you're washing it really well with a specific fruit and vegetable wash, but it's kind of up to their preference.
Yeah, I agree. There's really no research that I'm aware of that shows that organic food is any healthier in terms of the nutrient content as non-organic. So, and I am afraid that if I do recommend organic, then that might mean someone's eating less because it is so much more expensive. And so, any fruit or vegetable is better than no fruit or vegetable. And so really the bottom line is eat your fruits and vegetables and wash whatever you get, if it's organic or not.
Absolutely. I agree. And so this one kind of goes along with it. It's really more about asking, as a post-transplant patient, is there a rule of thumb regarding how long food is still okay to eat after cooking and left out? And honestly, this goes for anyone, and particularly anyone that with CKD, because they are necessarily at maybe a higher risk of getting a foodborne illness. So we want to, be really careful no matter what stage that they are at. But Kelly, do you want to discuss food safety after cooking?
Yeah, so we will usually recommend if you're out, so I'll usually give the example, like if you're at a family party and there's food that's prepared, like temperature sensitive food that's prepared, and it's been sitting out for more than 2 hours, I'll tell patients to stay away from 2 hours. If it's out, say you're at a picnic outside in like the blazing sun, I usually stay away from it if it's been more than an hour.
Yeah, and I think that's a good rule of thumb for any person with CKD. Anything different that Renee or Melanie that you guys discussed? No. Okay. I think that's all the questions that I had. Anything that I guess any words of wisdom that I guess I go through each of you that you would share with people that are watching that maybe are shelter in place at home, just and dealing with good nutrition and CKD right now? Melanie, I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, so I would say the most important thing to do right now is to plan your meals. When pre-grocery shopping or your grocery delivery from whether it be a grocery store delivering to you or your family delivering groceries to you, make sure that you know what you're going to do with that food. Try to plan recipes that you are going to make over the next 2 or 3 weeks until you get groceries again. And try to incorporate some fruit or vegetable into every meal. And so when I did my grocery planning, I tried to break it into different weeks. So I had my week 1 recipes, which included all my fresh fruits and vegetables. And then my week 2 and 3, that was all of my canned goods, pantry goods, and frozen goods. So really just planning so that you have healthy food and healthy meals on hand that you can eat.
And then for dialysis patients, I've been giving out like handouts to my patients with a list of non-perishable food that have a longer shelf life. So then my patients don't need to keep going out to the grocery shop, because every time you go out to public, that's another risk that you might contract the virus. And making sure, like what Melanie said, getting fruits, vegetables, just nutritional meals. And then for those that are, CKD, that are afraid, scared about the idea of dialysis, I just want to say that it's nothing to be scared of. A lot of my patients, when they first start on dialysis, it's you have to change your life completely to work around dialysis. But once you kind of put everything in place, it's not bad at all. Just sometimes people get so overwhelmed with the dialysis diet, but really it's a very personalized diet, and there will be a dietitian there that's going to be there with you all the time, and any questions that you have, he or she is going to be able to answer any questions that you have. So just don't be scared about the idea of going on dialysis.
And then for those post-transplant patients, especially during this time, just making sure, and even those who are on dialysis and have CKD as well, just making sure after grocery shopping or after if a family member is dropping off groceries, making sure that we're washing pretty much everything that we purchase. Like even if it's like a bag, like a can of frozen or a can of vegetables, for example, or a bag of frozen vegetables, washing it off with a little bit of soap and water, just to be on the extra safe side. As that immune system is still rebuilding after transplant, just because all that food has been at a grocery store and possibly touched by other hands. So just making sure we're taking those extra precautions to clean everything as much as we can with that stuff that comes from the grocery stores. And then even using, like when you're at the grocery store, if you have those reusable grocery bags, not bringing those into the grocery store because it can carry extra germs from the grocery store into the home. So opting for like paper or plastic bags at the grocery store is actually kind of better now too, in order to keep that immune system okay.
Yeah, and I think a lot of stores are not letting you use your own grocery bags right now. They're, kind of making you use the ones that they have in the store. And I think with the grocery bags too, if you are using them for any purpose, I tend to I have canvas cotton bags that I can actually wash. So, that's something else, is if you do in the future, use some recyclable grocery bags, or reusable ones, I should say, is getting ones that you can actually throw in the wash machine, and, that aren't kind of like a disposable, reusable one, is another good way to kind of keep germs at bay. But I think kind of going back to Melanie and talking about meal planning, and I know Renee, Renee and Melanie both have done some videos for us on the kidneys in the kitchen, but kind of just talking through when you are kind of making that meal plan and thinking through things, just kind of really simply thinking about making sure you have a protein option on your plate, a vegetable option, some type of grain option, and including a fruit as well. So trying to make sure you get some fruits and vegetables. I want to say, Melanie, you've said getting vegetables in at breakfast when we did the breakfast episode. So, it's always good to kind of make sure you're getting in, your protein, your starch choice, and then, your fruits and vegetables as well. Anything to add to just to, think of a simple meal plan of, instead of making it feel overwhelming, but just kind of thinking simply on what should be included on your plate.
Mm-hmm. And I want to sort of highlight something that we talked about earlier is not being afraid of frozen or canned fruits and vegetables, especially right now. They are great ways to get in your produce, and those are obviously going to last a really long time compared to fresh stuff. So don't be afraid of it. If possible, of course, get no salt added or low sodium canned vegetables, and try to get fruit that has been packaged in juice or light syrup. But if those options aren't available, again, some fruits and vegetables, even if it has extra sugar or salt in it, is better than none.
Well, I don't see any other questions coming in. I feel like we've touched on most everything at this point. Was there anything that we missed that any of you can think of that we missed? We talked about protein, we talked about potassium, we talked about fluids, phosphorus, calories,
All the highlights.
salt. We talked about salt. I guess, what are some of your favorite ways to flavor your foods instead of using salt? I know Melanie bakes and cooks and does recipe development a lot. So what are some of your favorite ways to flavor your foods without salt?
Yeah, my favorite is adding acid. So whether that acid comes from vinegar or lemon or lime juice, I use a lot of all of those things, because those things obviously don't have any salt in them, and they add tons of flavor. And so using that lemon lime juice or flavored vinegars or plain white vinegar in sort of new ways can add a lot of fun, a lot of flavor to your food. So for example, if you made say some chicken noodle soup, right before you eat it, if you squeeze a little bit of lemon or lime juice on it, it adds tons of flavor and a brightness that really helps you miss that salt a lot less. Again, I mentioned making salad dressing out of olive oil and vinegar, and getting sort of experiment with the different vinegars. Like balsamic vinegar is sort of an obvious one, but there's so many different flavored vinegars. I think I have pomegranate vinegar in my cabinet right now, so you can really experiment with those different flavors.
For me, I really like using garlic, ginger, and onion when I cook. I'm a big fan of doing stir fry because it's easy to do, and then you can add some vegetables and meat in it. I like to caramelize my onion. I think that adds so much flavor to your food. Natural sugar, that it adds sweetness to your food. And then every time before I stir fry, I would kind of put a lot of garlic because that makes the entire house just smell so nice, and then makes everyone so hungry. So go ahead and give it a try with those. A lot of the herbs and spices too. They add a lot of flavor to food instead of just adding salt.
Yeah, I was gonna mention herbs. I love using herbs on like chicken, for example, like a little bit of even olive oil too. It adds a lot of extra flavor. So I'll do like a little bit of olive oil on a chicken with rosemary or thyme in the oven for like chicken dish. Even with like roasted vegetables, a little bit of olive oil with just a variety of herbs. You could do rosemary, basil, thyme, whatever works best for you. You can kind of make up different concoctions with herbs too.
Well, great. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining us. And again, I don't see any other questions. So I think we can end here, but I will just share our sponsor slide one more time, and then again say thank you to our sponsors for making this virtual event possible. And I believe all of us would like to wish everyone to stay healthy and have a great evening. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.